Hey everybody, Brett here with the Indie Comics Dispatch, and we are so happy to have with us today Milton Davis, author of Changa Safari and a number of other books. Milton's book Changa was recently adapted into a graphic novel format by 133 Art and Robert Jeffrey. And so, Milton, thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, thank you for having me, man.
No problem. So, before we get into comic book stuff, tell us about yourself and your background.
I am a author slash publisher of science fiction and fantasy, and I focus on that genre based on African diaspora culture and traditions. I've been publishing for about 13 years now. We got a number of novels. I've done a number of anthologies and different things like that. In my real life, I'm actually an R&D chemist, so.
Oh, wow. Very cool. That's awesome. So about 13 years, fans of the show will know that I'm a big fan of anthologies. And so I just love a good anthology or book of short stories, whether it's in comic book form or traditional format. So what are some of your anthologies, just for my knowledge?
Well, the first anthology we did was one called Griots, which is a collection of sword and soul short stories that I actually did with Charles Saunders. It was like I said, my first one of our best-selling novels. We also have one called The City, which is a cyberpunk anthology. It's more like a jazz. I call it a jazz ensemble because we came up with this concept, and then every author kind of came in with their own idea and concept. So we just put it all together in an anthology. And one that you probably might be interested in particularly is Terminus, which is an anthology of urban fantasy stories based in Atlanta.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, Milton and I were talking before the live stream started. We're both Atlanta based. And so, yeah, that sounds amazing. Speaking of Griot, we had Jibba Mole Anderson on the show yesterday, and that's the name of his publishing company, Griot Enterprises. So.
Yeah, I've heard of his company. Yeah, he's got some good things going on there.
He does. He's a really cool guy. So you do. I mean, that's just your anthologies, but you have an extensive bibliography or number of works. Tell us a little bit more about your books, how you came to be a published author. Tell us a little bit more.
Well, I have about 19 novels that I've published since 2008. Wow. And the reason I came about doing it, well, I always had an interest in writing, and I've been dabbling with it since the time I graduated from college up to this point. About in 2005, I was like, okay, I'm 45 years old. I got more years behind me than I got ahead of me. So if you're going to do this writing thing, you're going to do it now. And at the time, self-publishing was starting to become very popular. Mm-hmm. And I decided to go that route because I felt like what I wanted to write and how I wanted to write it would probably not be that very interesting to publishers. Mm-hmm. So I was really determined to write these books a certain way and get it to a certain audience. So that's why I started publishing. That's why I started indie publishing. And it's grown a lot since then. My first book was Meji, which is a Yoruba word that means twins. And it's actually an African epic fantasy. And I got a special edition out of it now. But starting from there and just kept going and writing and publishing. And since then, I've been published in other anthologies, done work with some people on the mainstream side, but mainly I'm an indie publisher, and that's what I focus on.
That's awesome. Well, we focus on indie here too at the Indie Comics Dispatch. So that's one of the reasons why, Changa got done with its Kickstarter and then got out there. I received a copy as a reward for another, I think, book that I donated to on Kickstarter and got it and started kind of looking into it. Saw it was adapted by Robert Jeffrey. Saw that it was actually based on a novel or series of novels, right? There's 4, I think, in the Changa series, if I'm not mistaken. Isn't there in Changa Safari?
Yeah, there's actually five books.
Okay. Okay.
One is all of them are kind of like short story collections, but it's 5 in the series. Yeah.
Okay, so 5 books, and that this Changa and the Jade Obelisk is based on. And I thought this is really cool. We get a lot of writers and creators on the show who write and create their own comic, but this is a little bit different in that you had a novel first and decided that you wanted to create it into a graphic novel format. So another person that reminds me of is Malachi Bailey with Wingless Comics. He has a novel called Her that's currently being adapted into a comic book series. So tell us a little about your book, your original series of Changa. And let me make sure I'm saying that right. Am I saying it right?
Yeah, you're saying it right.
Okay.
Yeah, you got it right. Most people say Changa, but you got it right, Changa.
Yes.
Yeah, Changa was like I said, Meiji was my first novel. It was more of an epic fantasy type novel. But Changa was always meant to be more of an action-packed series type thing. And it's based on a character named Changa Diop. Changa is, and the other thing about Changa too is that Changa is a historical fantasy. It's actually based on the actual history of 15th century Africa and the trade that was going on between East Africa and India and China and that type of thing. So it's built in that world, but the stories are basically part historical, part fantastic, and the fantasy is based on the cultures and the traditions and the legends of the different countries that Changa goes through. But his story is basically he is the son of a king who was deposed by a sorcerer, and he had to flee when he was 8 years old. And we pick up years later when he's an adult living in Mombasa, which is a Swahili city-state that's in what is now known as Kenya. And he has decided that he's going to go on this journey, which is what safari comes from. He's going to go on this journey and trade and raise all this money. And then when he gets back to Mombasa, he's going to hire this huge army and go back to his homeland and take his father's kingdom back from this sorcerer. And so the series is basically, each book has 3 different novellas in it, 3 different stories in it. And in each book, he's in a different part of the world. Like the first one, he's East Africa, Indonesia, and China. The second book, he's in India, Yemen, and Ethiopia. And in the third book, he's in the Yoruba city-states, Kanem-Bornu, and Songhai. And the last book, the 4th book, is the book where he actually goes back home to confront the sorcerer, but not the way he expected to do it.
Very cool. So that sounds amazing. Just kind of exploring that whole, so many different regions. That's really cool. What gave you the idea to do that with the exploring of the different regions? Why was that important to you in the story?
Well, I'm a big history nut. And I love history, and specifically, African history.
Yeah.
So it kind of gave me, Changa gave me the opportunity to do a couple of different things. It gave me the opportunity to write some fantasy based in African culture. So Changa's also kind of an undercover history lesson as well, because
nice.
Because he's going to these, he's going to these places and he's dealing with these places as they were in the 15th century. Not as we know them now. For instance, when he goes to India, he's not in India. The Hindu kingdom in India at that time was called Vijayanagar. So he's in Vijayanagar and he's dealing with that situation like that. So I tried to make sure that in every situation that he's in, he's dealing with them in the way that in the context that they were at that time. And I think that makes it interesting as well, because people are looking at the books and they're like, oh man, I didn't know this was going on. I didn't know this history. One of the biggest examples was I had a friend of mine in Australia, and when he read the first Changa book, he got in contact with me. He said, "Hey, I had no idea about the Swahili city-states and all this stuff." He said, "After I read the book, I went and looked it up, and I found it." And I'm like, "Man, I didn't even know this history existed." And to me, I was like, "Yeah, that's it right there." that's kind of what. But you can read the book and not get any of that, and still enjoy it. Or you can read the book and you can see what's going on. And I think that adds another level of enjoyment to it as well.
That's really, really cool. That's really cool. I love it. I'm going to have to grab the books and give them a read because that sort of stuff's right up my alley too. I love that. Regular watchers of the show will know that I'm a white dude, but I have 5 adopted kids who are all Black. And so one of the reasons that I get into this is to learn more about Black culture and Black history through just my preferred storytelling medium, which is comic books. And so that's amazing, but I will definitely read some short stories about that also. So I'm going to have to pick those up. That's amazing. So you took Changa and you decided, hey, I want to make a graphic novel of this. Have you always been a fan of comics, or was this just something new that you just decided, hey, let's try this?
I am I could say a casual fan of comics.
Okay.
I grew up, and the thing, when I grew up reading comics, this is like back in the 60s and stuff. For some odd reason, I didn't read the Marvel and DC comics. I have a cousin who's really into them. My best friend, he's got the stacks of files in his garage with all the, comic books and stuff. I was reading stuff like the Charlton comics and stuff, stuff like that. I was kind of reading that kind of stuff. So I've always been a kind of a casual fan of it. What really got me back into it recently has really been indie comics, because I started seeing, knowing the authors and knowing the artists. I met a lot of these artists when I used to be on a site called Black Superhero. And there were a lot of Black artists that were doing comic books, and that kind of drew me back into it, especially the artwork and especially the stories they were telling. And that kind of got me back into it. And I had always seen at some point taking my stories and developing them into different types of mediums. And comic books were like the easiest one for me to go into first, because I knew so many people that knew how to make comic books and so many artists that worked in it. So it was kind of like an easier area to go into, to segue in.
That's really cool. So you decided to do this, and you were telling me before you kind of already knew Robert Jeffrey from local stuff.
Yeah.
So tell us about the process of working with Robert and adapting Changa into a comic book.
Well, the mastermind behind all this is really a brother named Jason Reeves. Jason owns 133 Art, and I've known Jason for a long time. And I was like, well, at first I was trying to figure out how to do the comic books myself. I was going to get the artists, and I was going to write a comic book. And I said, look, why am I doing this? Let me just call Jason. I said, hey, Jason, I want to do this comic book. I want to do Changa Safari. I said, you like to do it with me? He said, cool, yeah. So then we started talking about it. Then he called me one day and said, hey, man, Robert already said he wants to write it, before we even started looking for somebody, because he had done stuff with Robert before. And of course, I knew Robert, and I I loved his work. So basically, once we got the novel in there, Robert read the novel. Changa, the Jade Obelisk is actually the first story in the Changa book. There's like 3 stories in that book, and the Jade Obelisk is the first one.
Okay.
And so Robert read that, and from that he started building the script. And really, it was easy for me. I just kind of sat back and let them go. And Robert finished it, and Jason sent it to me, and I looked at the script, and I was like, "Hey, this is great, man!" So working with Robert was real easy because of his skills and stuff, and the fact that he really got into the book and was able to break it down into a format that was easily translatable to the artwork and stuff.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So how do you feel now that issue 1's out? How do you feel about your vision? I mean, because it was your novel in your head, and kind of you probably always pictured it in a certain way, and now it's out there in graphic novel form or comic book format. Issue 1 is out. How did it live up to what you had in your head? Is it different? Do you see them as 2 separate creations?
Well, this is the funny part. I'm old school. When I was imagining, Changa, like the old Marvel Conan type books and that type of art style, the John Buscema type stuff, And so then Jason came back and started showing me the artwork, and I'm like, okay, this is not what I was thinking about. But I looked at it, and I was like, but this is cool. I said, because, the artwork and the action, the way that Mateo did the artwork and stuff, it was more of a modern sensibility, and I really like the way that he did the work. I really like the way that Robert translated the action of the book into it, because I kind of write cinematically. I imagine my books as movies, and Robert captured that, and Mateo captured that, and then Loris came along and he threw the colors in there, and it just blew me away. So I'm very happy with the results of it. I really am. I'm waving it around and showing it to everybody.
That's awesome. I love that you had a thing in your head and it didn't meet that, but that ultimately you were okay with it, and that it's a different thing. And somebody, I forget who it was that we've had on the show, talked about trust your artist, that sometimes you have a vision as a writer and the artist has a different vision, and it's okay to just trust your artist sometimes.
Yeah, it is. I hire a lot of artists to do cover art for my novels. And I actually like to do that. What I do when I look at an artist, I like their style, and I really don't like to tell them a lot, because I want them to go into this and take their skills and their style and change it, and it always ends up better than what I expected. because I'm not an artist. I can't see it the way they can. So I'm always like sitting there anxiously, man, I wonder how they're going to do this one and stuff like that. And I'm always satisfied with it. And I had that same feeling working with Mateo, it was different than what I had imagined, but it ended up being better than how I imagined it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what's next for Changa and the Jade Obelisk? Is there going to be an issue 2? When's that going to be? Any spoilers you can drop us?
Yeah, we've already started working on issue 2. We'll have the same team working with us, which is very exciting because I'm really looking forward to see how they're going to interpret this next section. The only thing I'll drop to you about if you read the first book, that I'll drop to you about the second book is that in the second book you get to meet Bahati.
Okay.
You hear Amira Zaki talking about her and you see them running away from her, but actually in the second book you get a chance to meet her, and awesome. And I think that's going to be interesting. That'll be an interesting part of it and stuff.
Book 1 was so good. I usually have just a stack of comic books to read, and I finally got to read it not that long ago when I was inviting you on, and I just loved it. And so I was, sometimes an indie comic book comes out and there's only ever one issue. And so, it can even be successful, but there's only ever one issue. And Robert's a busy guy. So I was hoping you would say issue 2 is being worked on right now, because I can't wait to see that.
Yeah, we are determined to tell the whole series. We're probably like in that first story, we're going to probably end up with like maybe 4 or 5 books from that first story. So if you guys go out and buy millions of copies of this book, we could be doing this. We could actually be doing this for years.
You heard him. Go buy it, guys. It's a really good book. And people tease me sometimes because I say it's a really good book, but I only invite people on who have really good books. So that's the way I see it.
Well, that makes me happy to be here then.
Yeah. So Changa's obviously adapted and plans to continue adaptations of it. Any other plans for any of your other novels to be adapted?
Yeah, I've been looking. Actually, one of them, another one that I'm working on with Jason is one of my books called Woman of the Woods. And it's actually one of my most popular novels. This is another sword and sorcery novel, a sword and soul novel. And we have an artist that's working on that. This one actually is going to be it's not going to be a series. This one's going to be a one-shot graphic novel.
Very cool.
We'll get the entire story in that one novel. We just finished a Kickstarter with working with a company called Peta Studio, Peter Daniel. They're out of Lagos, Nigeria, and it's called Ngolo Diaspora. It's actually based on a script that Balogun Ojitari and I wrote a few years ago that won Urban Action Showcase Best Script, and we've been knocking around with it for a while. So we finally decided let's make a comic book series out of it. So we got with Peter, and the first issue of that one is actually going to be coming out pretty soon because the Kickstarter was successful. We just finished all the coloring and everything like that. So that one should be dropping pretty soon. So
it's very cool. I remember featuring that we featured Ngolo Diaspora as on the Indie Comic Minute, which is a show I produce weekly about just different things coming out. And so, I think Peter's actually on the live stream right now. He said on Instagram, "Hey, Milton."
Hey, Peter.
So, the great things coming out of them. I love watching their progress on Instagram.
Peta Studio is great. They're great.
Very cool. So the one-shot novel that you're talking, or graphic novel that you're talking about, kind of reminds me of the work that John Jennings and Damien Duffy have done with Octavia Butler's work, and just producing that. And I love that. My wife and I have a deal where every time they release a new graphic novel, she reads the novel format, and I read the graphic novel format. And so now, if you're doing that too, I mean, hey, there we go, another artist and writer to add to the mix there. I love it. That's really cool.
That's the plan, is just to build a separate division of MV Media that will be basically comic books and graphic novels. The majority of them based on the novels and the books that I already have out, but I'm pretty sure there's going to be some pop up in there that's just going to go straight to graphic novel too. So,
Very cool. Very cool. You were talking, you and I were talking a little bit beforehand about how animation is kind of the next indie wave. So many artists are starting to create animations of their books, and so I know Concrete Comics is working on it. Talasha of the CNS Comics, their main title is Talasha of the Stars right now, is working on it, and several other people that I've seen are starting to work on this. Jim Mole Anderson yesterday hinted at he's working on some animation for the Horsemen potentially.
Okay.
So any animation projects for any of your books?
Yeah, actually, before we did the Changa comic book, I was working with Eric Elder on a Changa animation,
Oh, cool.
and we got as far as doing an animatic, and we just kind of lost steam at that point. But it's something that we'll definitely end up picking up at some point again. Because I want to wait for a while and let the comic books get out and build the audience a little bit more before we start going after that again. I'm also working on an animation project with Avaloy Studios with Durante Avaloy.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually an animation based on my novel series From Here to Timbuktu, and that's a steampunk series that I've been working on.
Oh, cool.
And I have a team that I'm working with now on a 3D animation project, which is called Playing the Odds. It's based on a cyberpunk story that I wrote, and got some great people together to do. We got Mark Vision, Barnes on doing the animation. We got Paula Wilson's doing the audio, Balogun Ojitade doing the script for us. We got a bunch of people together, great people to do this project, and we actually are going to be dropping the trailer pretty soon for it. It'll be highlighted on our website and stuff. So I really love animation. I love animation more than anything else. And we always, as writers, we always talk about, I hope one day my stuff will be made into movies. But for me, it's more like, I hope my stuff will be made in animation. So it's working with people and doing it ourselves, but it's gonna get done. It's gonna get out there.
That's really cool. And you and I were talking. It's becoming easier and easier with technology to animate your own stuff. And I love the stuff we're starting to see come out. I think it's going to be this whole. I think it's the next wave in indie comics is that you make a comic and then you make a cartoon.
Yeah,
and I think that's really cool.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
I was just saying the software that's out there now is making it so easy. You got Blender, you got Unreal, you got so much, you got iClone, you got so much stuff out there. Mm-hmm. And just watching Mark work with it and see what he's able to create with it. It just makes me more and more excited about it because I'm like, man, this it's almost like somebody just came along and just put the keys to the castle and said, here you go, go make your stuff. And
it's the same thing that digital art and Kickstarter has done for comic books, just kind of handed people the keys to the kingdom. You no longer have to be a big printer or publisher to get your stuff published. You can do it by yourself. And now the same thing's happening with animation.
You got that relationship now between the creator and the consumer. And you don't have the middlemen in there that send you off sideways in all these different directions, trying to really get what they want, as opposed to you creating what you want and getting it directly to the people who want to see it. And I think that's the beauty of all this.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, then when you do it the indie way, you still own your creation, and nobody can take that from you.
Yeah. You go.
So there's people out there who probably have written novels. Maybe they haven't published it, but they have a novel idea, and maybe they're thinking of adapting it to a graphic novel or comic book format. Any advice for doing that? Like any thoughts that you have for people who are in the similar situation, maybe have a story or novel, even if it's unpublished, and thinking this would make a cool comic book or graphic novel?
Well, I would say like anything else, I would study the market. I would if you're thinking about doing it, I'm going to assume that you're already familiar with comic books, so have an idea of what the formats are set up and stuff. I did a lot of research on it because I was thinking about doing it myself. So I had books on comic books. I've got this SCAD book about doing comic books. I was reading all this stuff up so I could be familiar with the process. But I think the best case scenario would be if you can actually team up with someone who already has that experience and they know how to do it, and you guys work together in a partnership. Like I'm working with Jason Reeves and 133 Art. I think that was the best decision for it because it's like, why should I reinvent the wheel? And be open to working with people who are on the come up. Put it that way. You can beat your head against the wall with Marvel and DC and these other guys forever, or you can find somebody that's very talented that knows how to do it, and they're looking and they're growing just like you, and you guys can form a partnership and get it done that way. I think that's the best way to do it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I don't. Stacey Robinson, a wonderful artist, had joined the stream a little bit ago. I don't know if he's still there or not. But don't expect Stacey Robinson to illustrate your first book. don't do that, y'all.
Yeah, Stacey's cool. Me and Stacey and John are really good friends. I hang out, talk to them all the time.
That's awesome. I love both of their artwork. Their art is so amazing.
Yeah.
So what authors are you reading that you think other people should be reading? Give some other people some shout outs here for a minute.
Oh wow, man, I can do that for about 30 minutes alone. I tell you some, and most of the people that I'm reading right now are indie authors, because right now that's where I see the books that I want to read and that kind of thing. So I automatically give a shout out to Balogun Ojitade. I've been working with him for a long time, and I love his work. I love the way he writes. Nicole Kurtz, she's a very good writer. She does a lot of cyberpunk. Ronald Jones, who is like one of the best military sci-fi writers out there. If you like military sci-fi, you need to go check his books out. And I'm gonna forget somebody. They're gonna get mad at me. K Series, right? B. Sharice Moore. Ooh, man, I could go on for a long time. But these are just some of the people that I'm reading right now. Valjean Jeffers, I've been working with her for a long time. She does some steampunk and some paranormal work. Carol McDonald, who is really one of those hidden gems out there. She's an amazing fantasy writer, and I think if more people knew about her, her books would be a lot more popular and stuff. So. Those are a few people. Like I said, I could, talk even when I'm talking right now, I'm thinking of other people. Coming in my head right now, but check all these people out. We have a group called State of Black Science Fiction. We have the State of Black Science Fiction Book Club. A lot of these people post in these groups and stuff like that. And
is that on Facebook?
Yeah, both of those groups are on Facebook. So
very cool.
Check them out. Look them up. Check their libraries out. And you won't be disappointed.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So speaking of your books now, where can people find your books and how can they support you, Milton?
Well, all my books are available on my website. It's mvmediaatl.com. You can find them there. If you're hooked on Amazon, they're also available on Amazon as well. Basically anywhere that you find books, you can find my books. If you like Barnes and Nobles, you can go in there and order my books from there. If you got a Kobo e-reader, you can do it there. If you go to iTunes and you buy books, you can buy them there. But I would prefer you buy them directly from me. But that was
going to be my next question. Like, you probably get the best cut when they buy them directly from you, right?
Exactly. Yep. But at the same time, I want to be accessible to people too. So
I just went ahead and popped mvmediaatl.com in the comments section on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, so people can click directly on that and find your books. If they wanted to pick up Changa and the Jade Obelisk issue 1, is that available there too, or should they head to 133 Art?
It's available from MV Media and 133 Art.
Very cool. Very cool.
So if you think Jason is cuter than me, you can buy from me. What else?
We'll have to have Jason on one day and have a debate about who's the cuter one. That is awesome. Well, guys, if you haven't read Changa and the Jade Obelisk, get it. It's a wonderful book. Issue 1's out. You heard it here. Issue 2 is being worked on right now. So it's going to be one of those books that you can continue following. I, for one, am going to check out the rest of your works and read those. My wife and I can read them together, I'm sure, because my wife is a voracious reader and I am a voracious comic reader. But for a book of short stories, I will read a book too. So I'm going to check out Changa Safari and grab that too from you. Milton, thank you so much for being on here today. I really appreciate it. Like I said, I think I said this at the beginning. I know I said before we were live, just as I dug into Changa after I read it and realized it was a novel first, I just thought it was such a cool thing. It's something we don't always feature, and you kind of called it an open secret. And it's a really good story. And if you want more Changa adventures now, you can go get the novel series.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
All right. Thank you, Milton. We'll talk to you guys later.
All right.